Hello and welcome. My name is Mel Sherwood, and I'm thrilled that you are joining us for this series of interviews. For the past 10 years, I've been helping entrepreneurs, business leaders, and their teams to pitch and present with confidence. And in this series of interviews, I'll be interviewing and chatting with professional speakers who are at the top of their game. They'll be telling us a little bit about their journey to becoming a professional speaker and also some of their top tips for ensuring that you communicate most effectively. My guest today has over 20 years experience engaging audiences. Warwick Merry, CSP CVP, has been a Professional Speakers Australia PSA member since 1999. He has hosted events on 5 different continents. Antarctica is not looking likely unless it's a black tie event for penguins. A highlight of his being the host at a gala dinner on the Great Wall of China. One of the few PSA members who solely focuses on hosting events rather than speaking at them, he's become a highly regarded industry expert on hosting. A regular contributor to industry magazines and sought out for industry events, he constantly shares his ideas on how to make events awesome. He's a PSA past national president, past state president, past national treasurer, past board member, and past Nevin Award recipient. So he is definitely someone you can't go past. And I, for one, can't wait to hear what he has to share with us today. Welcome, Warwick Merry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. Hey, look, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you.
Me too. And I know that it's really early in the morning for you right now. So I am so pleased that you have managed to get yourself into morning gear and have the coffee, and you're with us for the interview. So thank you. What I wanted to do is I'd really love you to kind of take us back to your very first experience in front of an audience. What was that like for you? And what did you learn from it, perhaps?
Well, let's talk about how far back you want to go, because my speaking career started out when I was at high school. I was school captain of my school. Yes, I know, stop it. So every Monday I was on stage giving reports. And so I can't even remember how many people in our school, 400, 500 in Guernsey Hall. I remember it was called Guernsey Hall. And yeah, so every week I'm up on stage in front of people, to the point where some people, they get embarrassed about being on stage. I'm like, yeah, bring it on, get me a stage. Like in Australia, probably the biggest place to speak is the MCG. It holds, I think it's 120,000 people. And I would love to be on stage in front of that many people. So that was probably my first foray into speaking. And then from there, it just happened. So all of my friends' 18th birthday, they got me to host it. Their 21st, I started doing weddings. And then when I entered the corporate world, well, university, you give presentations, etc. But then when I ordered the corporate world, I spent 10 years working in corporate IT. And I ended up hosting a lot of events for them. And so Oracle was one of the companies I worked for, and we'd have guest speakers come in. So I would host and facilitate those. So I was a speaker before I even knew it. I love that philosophy of Kierkegaard's, which is life has to be lived forwards, but understood backwards. And so that played into that, as well as I did a lot of amateur theatre. I had my own community radio show, the Was Before Work Breakfast Show, Fridays on 2REM FM. So that's the kind of way that I was a speaker before I knew I was a speaker, and developed a lot of skill sets I didn't even know that I had, because I just loved doing this other stuff, and I've been able to bring them in to the speaking. And since then, so much of my speaking ability has been honed from non-speaking things, such as I sing in a choir regularly. I've done improv with Impro Melbourne for about 10 years. And so all these other skill sets that come into that stagecraft that just layer upon layer. And I've done some, formal presentation skills training and, NLP kind of hoo-ha. And a lot of it's the non-speaking stuff that really gave me some strong foundations for what I do.
That's amazing, actually. And I know, well, I have a background as a performer. So those skills have certainly come in handy for me when I'm standing in front of an audience. Although one of the challenges for me was moving from being an actor with a script to then actually speaking as myself in front of an audience. And I found that a real challenge to grasp that and to really connect with people and engage without sort of trying to be perfect all the time. So yeah,
it is that different skill set. So one of the things that I did after being a speaker for ages, I got the opportunity to do a one-man show in the Melbourne Fringe around Gough Whitlam. And for those of you who don't know, Gough Whitlam is one of the Prime Ministers of Australia, quite a influential and standout Prime Minister who spoke like this. And he was actually sacked by the Governor General, the only time it's ever happened. And so anyway, so I did this play, which is essentially a 50-minute monologue. And I was, like you, to go from free-form flowing to then to do the reverse, to go from free-form flowing, make it up as you go, with a bit of guidance to these are the words in this order at this time. Yes, we had sellout crowds, but the crowds were 35. It was a small cinema, a small area.
That's like my one-woman show.
Yeah. But it's like I was so the most nervous I have ever been on stage for those first couple of performances until I relaxed into it and gave myself permission to have a bit of flexibility, stay in character and do some stuff. But it is a very different skill set. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. I actually love the way that you said the word permission. And I think it's quite important. And I had to give myself permission to let go. One of the best pieces of advice I was ever given from a professional speaker actually was to just let go, and that, let go of my hang-ups and my perfectionism, and let go of the words on the page and just speak from the heart and be myself. And I know my speaking is so much better for that. And when I'm training other people, it's almost a lot of it's about giving them permission to let go and not be so perfect. And a lot of clients that come to me, they have some people come to me because they've been told they're very outgoing and bubbly in their normal interactions with people, and suddenly they get in front of an audience and they turn into this very posh and stiff performer that just doesn't actually have any connection with the audience. So it's almost about me just giving them permission to be themselves and communicate in their own style. And that's the key, I think. It's really learning your own style. And yours is obviously, your style is a real free flow. You're used to thinking on your feet. And I think that's what a lot of people fear. So have you got any tips around actually how do you improve your skills in that area? Obviously the improv and that sort of thing, but
yeah, for sure. So one of my great philosophies for time on stage is to be yourself amplified. So that way you're tapping into your authenticity. You are who you are. If you're a bit of an idiot, like I am, be a bit of an idiot and have fun with that. If you're really stiff and formal, and then be really stiff and formal. But whoever you are, you have to amplify it. And you'll know as a stage actor or a stage performer, the people at the back got to see what's going on. So it's a bit bigger gesture. It's a bit more thrusting voice. And so do that. What that means is you then have the freedom to just trust yourself, knowing it's just me. I can do whatever I would usually do. It was me and my best friend Mel that I'm talking to. So therefore, why would it be different if there's 100, 1,000, 2,000 people in front of me? So that concept for me of be yourself amplified is so important, because you've got to give 120% for them to get 90% to take home 50%. Like the energy just degrades quickly, especially on camera like we're doing today. Like the only energy is what we bring, and so therefore you've got to make sure that you can just channel that inner something and really get there and sort of have that kind of, I don't know, it's just like, just tap into whatever it is that you've got going on. And so, so it's really important to be yourself amplified and don't be fake. I've met too many speakers who are almost schizophrenic. Like the person they are on stage versus off stage is so different. And it just gives people a nasty shock. So just be yourself. And I think the most important thing for me is have fun. Like there's not a subject you can't talk about that you can't make fun. Like, I'm a qualified accountant. I can make numbers fun, right? And think about some of the best funerals you've got. Not that let's all compare funerals, but the best funerals are the ones where people share stories and laugh about the times they've had with people. Like, it's a sad, tragic moment often, but sharing some of the joy that individual's brought to your life, or brought to your life. Let's get some good English going on here. I'm only an Australian, don't worry about it. you know, that's an important thing to be able to do. So the Minister for Fun once said to me, if it's not fun, don't do it. If you have to do it, make it fun. And I'm a big believer in that, you know,
Yeah.
especially if you're a speaker. Like, seriously, no one has gone to a conference or an event and gone, really hope they've got some more serious, boring speakers with lots of content. You know, no one
So
does
right, and I
that. They're
bet
like,
as a host, you've seen plenty of that. I'm sure.
oh, and it's, you know, you see, like professional speakers are good. They're professional. Industry speakers sometimes they love their topic and they want to share everything. And I've only got 40 minutes, so here it comes. Get ready. I'm opening the fire hydrant. And
Yeah.
it's just like, no, give me two, three things,
Yeah.
and that's all I want.
Yeah. I learned a phrase several years ago, and I don't know where it came from, but the more you tell me, the less I remember. And it was
Yeah.
such a powerful piece of information that's planted in there. And now I realized how important it is to sort of strip everything out and make it really simple and easy, because people won't remember more
Yeah.
than a couple of things that you've said anyway. You might as well let them know what those things are that you want them to remember, rather than
Correct.
bombarding them.
Correct. And think about it, they're at an event that might go for half a day, 2 days, 3 days, right? So you're one of 20 speakers that they're going to see, or,
Yeah.
you know, and it's probably one of 100 interactions by the time they chat to a sponsor, speak to their friends. They're not going to walk away with more than two things they're going to do, like from the whole event. So
Yeah.
make it crystal clear what the two things are that you recommend, and maybe one of them will sneak into their list.
Yeah.
And then everything else just backs it up and supports it with a case study, a story, a fact, a statistic, something,
Yeah.
and focus on what's the key thing.
Yeah, so important. And I know, you know, if you've worked with people who are trying to pull together a presentation, you know, that is the thing. They've got too much information. Often I work with TEDx speakers, and they've got these ideas, and there's so many things that they want to put into it. But that is, you know, that's simply one idea. And it's about how do you actually work out exactly what that is. And I think the clearer you are on the idea that you want to present, the clearer your audience will be. So you have to really take the time to be crystal clear about it. I think that's a really
very much so.
advice. Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times stories. What role do you think that stories and storytelling has? There's a lot of talk around storytelling in business and that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on stories and storytelling?
There really is, isn't there? And they almost became trendy, and it's like, oh, you've got to be a storyteller. And then so we're like, well, let's get the story right. And that's the issue, I think, is we're looking for we're looking for the right answer. And it means for us that we've got to, you know, what's the research and what are we doing? People, what we're trying to do is just make things memorable. And so for me, I have, you know, I think it was Dougie Balouf who called it the apple tree approach, where you have the main trunk of what you're on about. You've got 3 or 4 branches that you get your points across. And then there's all these apples that back up the branches. And so storytelling can be quite good. And I think now more than ever, we want to hear personal stories. The last thing I want to hear is some story you've got off the internet. But I want to hear a personal story which has that principle you can apply. I've got to say, Yamini Naidu, who is a speaker based here in Australia, is probably one of the best storytellers. She's got a great book on storytelling and just knocks it down. Like, she's an economist. Like, seriously, she's an economist, and she's really good at storytelling. And I think about people who are great with a good yarn that's got a bit of a joke in it, and Billy Connolly. Billy Connolly is probably one of the best storytellers. I love his storytelling, and I love the way halfway through a story he'd go left field and just barrel down for 20 minutes and then say, okay, we were talking about that, you know, roundabout in Sucky Hall Road, and everyone's like, we were, and you jump back. Like that callback is so magnificent. Yeah. And so because you captivated and you're along for the ride, yet nearly every person in that audience could not tell you what that story was afterwards. But they got the joke, right? So stories are good if they back up the point you're making, but you don't want to just tell a story for story's sake. Yeah. You've got to make sure that it's in the same way a lot of people, when they create a presentation, go straight to Keynote, PowerPoint, whatever. And the last thing you want to do is do that. Like, it's not about your slides. Some of the best presentations I've ever seen have had no slides. So it's not about slides. It's about what's what does the audience want and need to hear, and what's the best way to get that message across?
Yeah.
And it may be a story, maybe a slide, maybe a visual gag, maybe a sound, maybe a smell. And good luck with you with the smells. That's not easy to do. But what's the best way to get that across? And that's what the focus needs to be. And storytelling is a great way to do it if you can do it well. And of course, as with all things, the best way to get better at storytelling, tell more stories.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that there is a bit of an art and a science around great storytelling, and it does need practice, because sometimes people put too much detail into the story, and we need enough detail to make it come alive and make our audience connect and visualize in their own minds. But too much detail and irrelevant detail is where we sometimes go a bit off track, I think, with storytelling. So
yeah, it's very Goldilocks, not too much, not too little, just right. Exactly. And the only way to know the just right is just keep doing it.
Yeah. And I'll get the details of that book as well that you mentioned, and pop that in the comments when I share this interview, because I think any resources, actually, while we're on that, do you have any other particular resources that you have found helpful or that have had an influence on the way that you communicate?
So for me, I think there's a great comic, and I haven't got it to hand. Basically, someone comes up to a musician and goes, "Oh, you're so good. How are you so good at? You must be gifted." And the musician goes, "It's practice." No, it was obviously from a gift from God. You've just born with it. It's practice. Oh, I wish I was good at you. It's practice. And I think that is the secret to getting better at anything, is just to do it. So if you want to be a better presenter, do it. So that means volunteer at your kids' kindergarten to give the annual report presentation. Volunteer to speak in front of the footy club. Like, take whatever opportunities are out there and practice. It's one of the great things about Toastmasters and Rostrum and whatever else, because whatever you think about their approach to presenting, they get a little bit too obsessed about counting the number of ums for my like. But it's an opportunity to get in front of people and practice. Yeah. And that's what makes you better. I'm not a huge believer in the 10,000 hours, but I am a huge believer in do the time and get better at it. If you want to be better at anything, do it. I've taken up doing a bit of woodworking stuff, and let's be honest, some of the pieces are a little bit rubbish, but the more I do it, the more I learn. Though.
I've seen them.
That's it, And so the more I learn, the more I do, and it's that whole, okay, I've now learned what not to do. And the same on stage. There's so many little things, and the better you get, it's that the more you know, the more you don't know. So there's all these little finesses that I'm now trying to do with my craft to get better at what I do. And the stuff that I used to think important, I look back now and go, that was so not important. But at the time it was.
Of course. And you maybe needed to go through that stage in order to know that you don't need it.
For sure.
It's still part of the journey, isn't it, really?
Yeah, very much so. And it's just, it's the different stages of where you're at, And it's like, you think of any parent, first kid, they're obsessed about everything. By the time they get to the third kid, they're like, they'll be right, let them play in traffic, they'll live. But there's a lot to be said for all the stuff that you thought was amazingly important. Now you're like, first time sterilized, we'd get the alcohol wipes to wipe the dummy of the pacifier, call it what you will. Nowadays, you go, clean it up, there you go, kid, And for those of you who are watching or listening, I have no children, therefore I know all about them.
I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm sure you didn't have children, do you?
Yeah. I got a small fluffy dog, and he's pretty much looks after himself.
Yeah, well, that's handy, given what your advice was. But anyway, I know, right? I don't have children either, so I'm not not making any judgment.
We should start a podcast about how to raise kids.
Yeah, we should. So the other thing I just wanted to touch base on, the do it, and I talk about three things leading to what I call presentastic or pitch-tastic, and it's preparation plus practice plus passion. You've got to have a dash of that, but the practice part is so key. And you're talking about doing it, but it's also about reviewing it. And I know a lot of people cringe when they film themselves, but if you're doing that, that report or whatever, if you can actually record yourself and look back, you start to see what's working. And quite often it's quite reinforcing the stuff that you're already doing well, and also just highlights where areas that you can improve. But I really think unless we as you said, practice, we keep doing it, but also I think reviewing it is quite key as well. And I know, lots and lots of professional speakers who always record themselves and always go back over their talks every single time to just see where they can enhance it. And they'll hear where the audience might be laughing that they weren't expecting, or, some people will actually record the audience as well as their own performance, so they can see which things are really resonating with the audience. And I think that's a really interesting idea to
and there's a secret to reviewing yourself, and particularly reviewing yourself on video. And I got this from Michael Grinder, who's this master in non-verbal communication. I flew to the US and did a week-long course with him, and cost a lot of dough, but it was really worth it because of some of the stuff he talked about. And so we were doing video recordings of our presentations as part of it, and he said, never watch more than 3 minutes. You just do it in 3-minute chunks, because what happens is you go, oh, I've stuffed that up. Oh, I've stuffed that up. Oh, my God, I've stuffed that up. Oh, my God, I'm hopeless. I can't do it. But if you just focus on a key thing, how was my opening? How was my closing? I really want to get this point across, that middle bit. How was that? And that doesn't mean you can't review the whole lot, but maybe restrict yourself to just watch a couple of minutes of video, look at how you can do it better, and then maybe come back to it. Don't obsess. You'll get to the point where you're like, I can actually look at this video and go, who's this speaker? What has this speaker done? So it's not you, it's this speaker. So you've got enough distance to be objective and not get that whip out and self-flagellate, as many of us tend to do. And so therefore you've got enough distance to be able to objectively review it and actually say, I like the way that speaker did this, and I reckon they can tweak that a little bit. And that made a massive difference to me.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach. And I'm going to take that on board, because I often tell people to sort of, look at it with kind eyes when they first watch something, and look at, all the things that are being done well. But it's human nature to, really hone in on those things that we're not doing so well. I often tell people to actually watch it without the sound as well, so they can just see what their body language is doing, and then listen to it without watching, and get a different perspective.
And often, because it's us, we obsess about the wrong things. So we'll look at it and go, oh, look at the bags under my eyes. Oh, I never realised I've got one ear higher than the other, and I should have had a haircut. Meanwhile, we're 10 minutes into the presentation and all the important stuff you've skipped, right? Yeah. And so it's that whole, here's my friend giving a presentation, what feedback could I give them? And if you can frame it like that to yourself, that makes a big difference. The other thing that I'll do, because a lot of my stuff is made up as I go, and I mean that in a very professional way. Yes. When you're hosting, there's a lot of ad libs. I love to play with the audience, and I want to be really present in the moment. So anything that's going on, I'll play with it. And sometimes I get a magnificent response to stuff, and I'm like, that's a keeper. Yeah. And so there's a particular response to a situation, something I've said, something I've done. As an example, one of the phrases I'm always listening for when I'm hosting is, and in conclusion, or, and with this last slide. And because if they've got a 50-minute slot, and at the half-hour mark, they're like, and in conclusion, I've got some work ahead of me. So I had this one speaker who was talking about different things and talking about how their wife was in a choir and blah, 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 blah. And this particular audience was quite spread out. In a venue, everyone wants to sit at the back and not too far to the front and spread out. And they got to this, and in conclusion, I'm like, I've got 20 minutes here. What am I going to do? I need to lift them up. And it just hit me that I could make them sing, because I wanted to turn them into a choir. And my theory is always the audience must be safe. So for me to turn around to an audience and say, you're all going to sing, they'd all go, no, we're not. So I'm like, how do I keep them safe? And I thought, well, if I sing the verse and they sing the chorus, that would work. And if it's a song that everyone knows, or knows well enough that they can hide next to the person next to them who knows it, that'd be good. And so I went with We Are the Champions, because nearly everyone knows We Are the Champions, except I don't. I don't know what the verses are. So I'm Googling the verses as I'm writing some notes on my form, and I get up there and I'm like, oh, wasn't that magnificent? Congratulations. And, he talked about his wife was in a choir, and wouldn't it be cool if we had a conference choir? Most people are like, oh, no. And I'm like, so whatever, I was able to speak to someone at the back of the room who had talked about a song before. I said, Pat, what was that song? We Are the Champions? Yeah, we could do that. So how about, you know, and then I just launched into it and they loved it. And in fact, at the end of the conference, it was one of the most talked about things. So I've since done that a couple of times because this is the secret to the future of events. Events are evolving, in my opinion. It's no longer do the event to them, it's do it with them. So they got to be the stars of the show because the sound was pretty good because it's pretty much in unison.
Yep.
And yeah, so sometimes it's, now that's an extreme example, but sometimes there'll be some things that you'll say or you'll do that you'll get a reaction you weren't expecting, or it really resonated, or maybe there was a facial expression you did. And doing a lot of Zoom stuff is brilliant because you may have noticed during the call, I leant forward, turned the head to the side, raised the eyebrow a bit, showed off all of my bald head. But what it does is variety. Yeah, there you go. You know, versus just sitting here for the entire time. Oh, yes, Mel, it's lovely to speak to you. I wish I was a news reading robot. And it is being able to do some of that stuff and look at myself and go, oh, no, that side's not as good, but this side's okay. You know, whatever it is. Yeah. So, yeah, that review and keep. What are you going to keep? What are you going to get rid of? That's a really important thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you just touched on Zoom because we are doing a lot of stuff on Zoom or generally online or Teams or whatever platform it might be. And I know that you also host events and support other people with all of that stuff as well. So give us some of your top tips in terms of how to come across well on Zoom and also how to actually run an effective event online.
Yeah, cool. Let me give you what I call the Holy Trinity. So the Holy Trinity, these are the three things you've got to get right. You've got to get your lights right. So as you can see, both Mel and I are beautifully lit. Don't be scared of a bit of shadow. Like I've got a bit of shadow over this side because it's, 6 o'clock in the morning and there's no sunlight. But there's a little bit of shadow, but the lights are right. For me, you'll notice I've got this beautiful, purpley coloured wall in the background. It's a light. It's a white coloured wall. It's an LED globe. I can change colours, so it just casts up nicely. I've got a big bright light up here. I've got some light diffused. You don't want to be one of those people. I'm not a fan of ring lights because often you'll look and go, oh, they're using a ring light. So you've distracted, particularly if you've got glasses, you can see it. So you want to diffuse your light a little bit, and that can be as simple as putting some baking paper over the front of your ring light, and it's fireproof and it spreads the light a bit. So that's a cool thing to do. So get your lighting right. Number 2 is your composition. So if I just turn this off for a sec, so you'll see this composition. I'm pretty much centered. My head's towards the top of the screen. I've got a little bit of something over my shoulder, but that's about it. I used to have a bookshelf here, and I'd see people sort of go like this because they're trying to work out what's the book I've got on my shelf, And yours is great because you've got the Be More Red, which is your branding. You've got red lips and some movie little shutters and a bit of plant life. It's great. There's enough depth there, so you get the bokeh effect a little bit. It's great. So having that composition is really important. I'm not a fan of virtual backgrounds, and the reason for a couple of reasons. One, if you have hair, it disappears. If you have fingers, it disappears. But you go, there's two things, two things, and they sort of disappear because of the virtual background. So now I get for some people on Teams or whatever it is, if you're in a corporate environment, you want to hide where you live, and I get that. Just choose well, just have something that's just very, very simple. So, and sound is the most important. I can put up with dodgy lights. I can put up with a bad composition. I will not put up with bad sound. If I can't hear it properly, I'm off. So get a good microphone. Look at, if you're in your kitchen, as a lot of people seem to do, there's a lot of hard surfaces that give echoes. So for me, I've got a bit of foam on my walls. I'm in my bedroom, my spare bedroom. I've got my cupboard door open, so it's got all my my clothes in there, which absorb the sound. I've got carpet on the floor.
Yeah.
And it just absorb. Oh, if you want to get into podcasting, the best place to record is in your walk-in wardrobe. That's the best. Absolute best. So you got to get your sound right. And the fourth bonus tip for the Holy Trinity is, and we've both been doing this, look down the barrel of the camera. So I could be looking at Mel like this, and all of a sudden I'm just not engaging. You've got to look down the barrel of the camera. So you can get some funky cameras that sit in front of the monitor if you want it. It's easier to train yourself to look down the barrel of the camera. And it just makes such a difference. That eye contact makes such a difference. Yeah. So for online, they're the main things you've got to set up. Now, when it comes to running or hosting an event, breakout rooms are your friend. I can't tell you how magnificent breakout rooms are. Again, it makes the event about the delegates and not about you. Too many speakers do what do I need to tell them versus what do we need to hear? What do we need to experience? What do we need to make as part of this? So look at ways, don't just do engagement for the sake of engagement. Oh, I'm going to do a quiz and here's the answer. Fantastic. Let's move forward. It's like, well, once you've got the answer, you've got to do something with it.
Yeah.
If I'm getting them to do a poll, what am I doing with that? How does that add value to what we're doing? There's been so many times I've seen people put in an exercise and then do nothing with the outcome, not use it as a learning point. So it's like whatever you're doing has to have a reason. And breakout rooms are just the best thing. People are too scared to use them. But can I tell you, they are so and it's in Teams, it's in Zoom, it's in a lot of the platforms. They're just the best. And the chat box, oh my God, speakers who go, oh, no, that's just distracting. Turn the chat off.
I use the chat box all the time.
Turn it on.
Yeah.
Like, turn it on and get them talking about ridiculous things. Like, anything that gets their energy up and chatting is just brilliant. Like, often when I start an event, I'm in that chat box and I'm telling them to use it. And we're talking about where you're from, what's the weather like, what are you drinking, what's in your coffee cup, you know, whatever it is, just to get that engagement, get them used to using it and being part of the event, and they'll love you for it. The other thing, as we said way back when, was the only energy is the energy you bring. Stand-up comics hate online performances because you can't get the laughs. Even with a laughter track, I mean, like you can get that kind of laughs, but it's like they just hate it because the feedback's not there. So as a speaker or facilitator or host, you have to just assume that you're magnificent. And for some of us with a massive ego, that's not a hard thing. But it's like you've just got to assume that everything's rock and roll and you're doing it well and go with it and play. You've got to keep bringing the energy. Just when you think you're done, you've got to bring a bit more. I find online things so much more exhausting than face-to-face because you can't bounce off the energy in the room. You've got to give it all. And it's really possible. And I've got to tell you, most people don't. Most people treat it like a corporate meeting where there's 50 people. Oh, I've called you all here today to talk about the state of the budget. And that's how they treat like some session. And I'm like, nah, it's got to have bells and whistles and special stuff and movement gestures that are in screen versus big out here. And, you know, before I put my fingers up and realized that I had the thing over the top. So I've always got an eye on what's going on camera so I can go, oh, that was wrong, put it on this side. So it's just a few little tricks you've got to do just to keep it all contained, but energizing the people at the other end.
Yeah. Oh my, and that is why you are an absolute legend at what you do. Those tips are absolutely gold. I've just realized we're kind of running out of time here. So one final question for you. And that is, if someone is wanting to become a professional speaker and get paid for speaking, what would be your number one tip?
Number one tip, join your professional association. I'm a huge believer in professional associations. I've been part of PSA for a very long time. And I've been blessed in that I've won a few different awards, etc., from the association. And yeah, here is some of the ones that have just come
I love it.
Look, I've got to tell you, there's a couple of reasons, because people say to me, well, why would I join an association? I could just go out there and do the work. Can I tell you, hundreds of thousands of dollars have come through referrals from my association. Now, it's not the reason I'm part of it. I'm part of it I'm a big believer in contribution. But I've learnt a lot, and I've learnt a lot of what not to do as well, and so I've been able to share a lot of different things and in that process learn. During the pandemic, I became a bit of a go-to for doing online things because I'm a nerd and just embraced it and just shared the love, because we're all in this for a long time. And let's be honest, virtual, the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back. There is so much that you can do better virtually, and geography is no longer an issue. And some of the tools that, like, for example, Zoom has translation, both translation, you can have a second sound audio file. I was presenting to Russia and other countries where they've got different languages going on, but automatic transcription comes up and you can do automatic transcriptions in foreign languages. It just does some really cool, and AI just cranks it. So virtual presenting's around for ages. So join your professional association. I'm a big fan of that. The other one is, as we said before, just do more presentations. The more you do, the better you get. And then when it comes to being a professional and charging money for it, push the limit of how much you charge. Seriously, it's a lot easier to drop your price than it is to increase it. So start big. You know, it's
Great
got to be commensurate with the value that you bring.
It
Don't get me
totally
wrong. They
does,
go, oh,
yeah.
I'll bring you $50,000. There are speakers out there who charge that much, but there's not a great number of them. Definitely not in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's, you know, the hundreds are not your friend. You know, I know some people go,
Yeah,
oh, I
I
got to
don't
charge a
think
couple
people
$100.
realize that people don't realize the amount of effort that goes into pulling together a speech or a presentation and turning
Oh,
up
for
and
sure.
bringing your energy and all of that. And yeah,
For sure.
when people are starting out, they probably do undercharge or undervalue
For
themselves.
sure.
And you have to start
Because it's not
somewhere, of
the,
course.
you
But
do, you do.
yeah,
And it's not the hour of the presentation. People go, well, that's a lot of money for an hour, but it's not the hour, right? It's the 40 years that's taken you to get there.
yeah.
It reminds me of a story I got off the internet, so you know it's true. Let me tell you the story. So there was a guy who was working in an industrial factory where they designed and manufactured widgets, right? And after 50 years working there, he retired. Now, about 2 years later, the widget machine broke down. They couldn't get it fixed. They didn't know what to do. And someone rang him out of desperation going, look, mate, the widget machine's broken. We need it. You've got to come and fix it. So he came in and he looked at it and he listened to it and he rotated the big flywheel and then he tapped it in a few places and he got a bit of chalk out and he drew an X and he said, drill a 10 millimeter diameter hole, 10 millimeters here, that'll fix it. So they did that and it fixed it. They said, fantastic, send us the invoice. So he sent them an invoice for $50,000. Finance nearly crapped themselves and said, oh my God, we need an itemized invoice for this $50,000. And he said, certainly, sent them an itemized invoice, one chalk mark, $1. Knowing where to put it, $49,999. And I think that's a great representation of speaking in terms of it's the skills, the knowledge, the depth of what you're bringing. That's where the value is and what they will do with it. You know, I think that's don't underestimate the value you're bringing to an event or an organization.
Yeah. That is a brilliant piece of advice. Warwick Merry, thank you so much for your time today and the magic that you brought with your sound effects and etc. It's been an absolute delight to talk to you, and I thank you so much again.
Oh, yay! What joy! It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for your time, and for anyone listening, thank you for your time. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Thanks again.